if we can,
Well,
yeah.
officially, I'm Dr. Linda Vilvock-Biakis. I know it's a mouthful, but I usually go by Dr. Linda only because I know that the name is rather complicated and I really don't like to hear it messed up. So I just call me Dr. Linda. When I taught university, my students just call me Dr. V, so they short it. But part of that is that, yes, there is that formal respect of giving me the respect of my due, but it's not so formal that it's pushed back, that I'm unapproachable. And I kind of got that from my southern friends, because in the South, you will call somebody like Miss Linda, they would call me in the South, or my husband, Mr. Gilbert, to give that formal respect, but it's not so unapproachable. That's why you call by the first name. So I was born and raised on the island of Haiti. It's in the Caribbean, for those who don't know it, because I always get that question too. So people know the Dominican Republic, so we're the Haitian Republic. It's two republics on one island. It's the island of Haiti. I moved to the United States when I was 14 years old, and I went to New York, which is where I met my husband. He had moved to New York from the Philippines when he was 11 years old, and we've been married since 1990 and 91. We have one son, 28 years old. He was Army infantry officer. I joined the Army later. I became a JAG paralegal. Went in with my bachelor's, got my master's while in, and then after that I got my doctorate. I spent 12 years in the field of substance abuse counseling and 16 years in the field of anger management. So I was doing work with court-ordered male perpetrators of domestic violence. I've always had, at my core, just a desire to help people better themselves, because I'm the type of person that I always like to better myself. I compete with myself. I don't compete with people around me ever. And people sometimes think that's arrogance. It's not, because you have skills that I'll never have, and I have skills that you'll never have. So what's the point of competing with each other? But if I compete with myself, I can be better than I was the day before. So I always want people to improve themselves, to change for the better, to learn about themselves, to navigate this experience of being a human being in this world and what that means. And that's just the very low level, because as you grow in Christ, you learn to understand that, okay, it's not just a human experience. I'm a spirit being in this human experience. But most people will meet you where you are, like God. We'll talk about navigating this human experience. So I've always wanted to help people, and that's why I've always been called to help people. And I heard a pastor in our church say, your calling is not necessarily your aptitude, meaning your job, but sometimes it's both. So my calling, I found out later on in life, was to teach the word and preach the word. That's what God called me to do. But my aptitude has always been psychology. I went to school, I took Psych 101, I fell in love, and I never looked back. And there were a few bumps in the road. It wasn't smooth sailing that I just did everything smoothly from beginning to end, but the desire never waned. So no matter how many years had passed between degrees, every time I took the first class, it's like that love came. So when I was teaching university, a lot of my students who had a different major changed their major, and they said because my passion for psychology was so much that it was obvious how much I love psychology, that they fell in love with it and they wanted to help, and they wanted to study the human mind, the thinking, the behaviors, the emotions. And to me, that's very high praise, that you can impact people's lives in so many ways. So I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a child of God, I'm a psychologist, I'm human.
What, in your experience, do you see as the biggest need for families or young adults that you think maybe God is calling you to bring hope?
So I am a certified substance abuse counselor, and I kind of fell into that, just like with the anger management. I kind of fell into that. That was never my pursuit. And it's amazing how God works, because even though that's something I would have never pursued, but it ended up being two of the biggest blessings in my life. And the population in substance abuse treatment that I worked with the most was teenagers. And I always felt I caught them right at the age before it became too late. I wanted to catch them where there was still hope, that they could still see value in their life, they could see value in themselves. It's a very hard thing to navigate, because if you look at Erickson's stages of development, when you're that teenager, then you're that young adult, you're still trying to find your place in the world. And so for young people, it's that, where do I belong? How do I fit? Who am I? And there are a lot of mixed messages out there in the world to influence a young mind and to lead them astray, to lead them away from what their purpose is or what their calling or even what their love is. You have societal demands, you have friend demands, you have job demands, you have school demands, you have religious demands, you have parental demands, right? So where do I fit? How can I be my own person? How can I find my own voice without disturbing all of these things? So that's for young people, is to basically guide them into finding their own voice, still respecting the authorities appointed over them, like the Bible tells us to do, but is to help them find their own voice and to be their best self. Families, it's basically, what I have found is primarily teaching people how to talk to one another and how to listen, because the biggest destroyer of marriages is the lack of or poor communication. People don't know how to talk. People don't know how to listen. So the marriage always gets lost because people have agendas, people have biases, people have prejudices. The wall's already up. So if my wall's already up, how can I hear you? How can I speak properly? If I say, well, that's just the way I am, that's just how I talk. No. People need to understand that there's a pattern, that there's a formula to speaking and speaking well, so that the message comes across, not so who can talk the loudest, because that's why people scream, because they think I'm not heard. So if I want to be heard, I got to be louder than you, and it's like, before you know it, knockout, drag out, fight. But if people learn how to talk and how to understand each other rather than have their own way, it's like when you enter a marriage, what was your agenda? You know, what did you hope? There's a saying that has been attributed to Albert Einstein, which there's a debate that Albert Einstein didn't really write it, where it says, men marry women hoping they will never change, and women marry men hoping that they will change. But it's like, if you married the person, that's the person that you chose, why would you hope that they change? Granted, there are some behaviors that you might want to look at changing, but who you are personally, why would you want that person to change? Because that's who you fell in love with. So what is your agenda? What is your, and a lot of times we come into marriage thinking that, oh, they should be just like my family was, and you forget that that's a person all of their own. And I experienced that with my in-laws, that they expected me to immediately get into their cultural norms, and they refused to understand that I was a person by myself and I have my own cultures, and I come from a very cultural background. I'm a mixed ethnically, mixed culturally. So I come from with all of these things. So let's try to figure out who we are. So it's a lot of unintentional hurts and a lot of dismissals that people do. They tend to dismiss each other and each other's value in each other's life. And the other biggest thing is that as long as you go through life, you're going to learn, you're going to change. The process of learning and the process of changing never stops. But couples forget that they have to grow together, so they grow apart. They pay attention to job. They pay attention to extended family, not the family that God told them that you leave your mother and father and cleave to your wife. They pay attention to family of origin. They pay attention to career and making that money. Then the kids come, and it's all about the kids. And there's nothing wrong with all about the kids, but they forget to make time for self, because the kids, you know, they need guidance. They're young. They need your protection. They need your care. But you also need to nurture your marriage. You also need to nurture your family. You know, a lot of guys used to come in anger management and say, oh, I value family. And we're like, but look at your behaviors. Your behaviors, your actions speak louder than words. Your behaviors are not showing me that you're nurturing family. Your behaviors are not showing me that you're placing wife over everybody else. Your behaviors show me that you're placing your boys, hanging out with your boys, over everything else. You're placing working all the extra hours when your wife is saying, you're not spending enough time with me. So people forget to listen to each other. And we used to tell them, when you first met your wife, how are you? Oh man, we used to talk for hours. I would listen to everything she was saying. When did that change? And the answer, 9 times out of 10, when I started taking her for granted, when I stopped pursuing her, when I figured I already got her, I don't have to put effort into the marriage. So the expectation is, I already pursued you, I got you, I don't have to do it. And women saying, but you pursued me, so I'm expecting that for the rest of my life. It's like that. There's an old Chinese proverb that say, a great lover is not somebody who loves a million women. It's somebody who loves one woman for the rest of his life. Are you pursuing that one person, that one husband, that one wife that was given to you? Or are you pursuing everything else and just assuming that that person will always be there? And then before you know it, when the person's had enough, you're facing a divorce because you failed to listen to the little signs, pay attention to the little sign and listen to the warnings that your partner was saying. If you don't want me, I'll find somebody else. And I tell guys, there's no absolute, but women tend to operate generally under this. They will keep telling you when they're unhappy, and then you have to worry when they stop talking. Because by the time they stop talking, they don't care anymore, they're already out of the relationship. So those are usually the things that I find that affect. I mean, there's a million other things. There's substance abuse, there's domestic violence, but as a general rule, for families, that seem to be one of the biggest issues.
You know, I only met you over lunch, 30 minutes maybe. Are you always like this? Like, it's very easy, low-key, I'm comfortable?
I've been told yes. I sometimes ask God if there's a sign on my head that says therapist, because I've met people, strangers, waiting for my food at a restaurant or in the street, and people will start telling me their whole life story. So I've been told that I have an ease about me. Now, I'm not perfect, you know. When I go home, I'm not a therapist. When I go home, I'm a wife. And if my husband mess up, you know, sometimes I try to handle it this way. And I think for the most part, I'm this person. But every once in a while, like anybody else, I can lose my cool. But for the most part, I'm this person. Not a lot tends to rattle me. And as a therapist, I think part of it too is you're trained to listen, so it's easier for me to listen than to talk. So this is a little bit different for me.
Yeah.
Even though I can talk, but usually.
So, what in a first or couple meetings, what can people, when they meet with you, what can they expect and what that would be like?
Ooh, so for me, I like to set boundaries and expectations right away, because that's important. Because if you don't do that as a professional, if you don't do that, then you set yourself up for failure. Because even when you set boundaries, there could be one or two people who don't respect the boundaries. So for me, I like to go over the rules of what that would look like, what my expectations are in terms of, you know, be on time, keep your appointments. If you're not going to show up, let me know you're not going to show up in advance, and then it's your responsibility to call me back and make an appointment with me. It's not my responsibility to pursue you. What else? You can end therapy at any time, but just be respectful enough to tell me that it's not a good fit. And if I give you advice, you don't have to accept it, you know, but I will challenge you, because I tell people, you don't have to accept it. God gave you free will. Who am I to take it from you? So if I give you advice, I just give you advice based on what you tell me the problem is and based on what your personality is. I read people fairly quickly, so I usually know who I'm dealing with. So I tailor the therapy to fit the person. There's no cookie cutter approach that one size fits all. Which is why I diversified actually my degrees. I didn't just go one way all the way. I got a bachelor's degree that was a combination of social and development psychology combined with a little bit of social work in there. My master's degree is in marriage and family therapy, and my doctorate is in counseling psychology. And so I wanted to see, okay, how many different approaches I can get. And even though marriage and family did give me that different approach, there's no cookie cutter, and I'm not disparaging the people who just go one route. That just wasn't for me, because I know that it's not one size fits all. So I try to reach as many people as I can, because, like, for example, when I explain to some clients what Rogerian or client-centered is, they're like, that one wouldn't work for me. I need a more direct approach. So for people who need a more direct approach, I'll be more directive. For people who are more thinking, I use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's more of like, okay, think about why you do the things that you do, why you say the things that you say, and then you can try and change your behaviors. Because if you just change the behaviors without understanding, old behaviors are going to come back. But if you understand why that behavior is maladaptive, then you can begin to make the changes and it will fit more. But yeah, they can expect me to be very forthright. And I tell them in advance, because I do a pre-screening with people where on the phone, because I don't want it to be like you came and you wasted your time, because I can't help you. So I'm very direct with them in terms of very transparent. This is what you're going to expect. And I tell people right away that I'm always going to listen to you. I'm always going to validate what you're saying. But the one thing you're not going to get from me is what you want to hear. I'm not that therapist. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. If you want to be validated for every little thing and for me to agree with you, then I'm not doing my job as a therapist, because you're here to change. So if I'm just okay and letting you figure it out in your own time, when time is of the essence, yeah, we're not going to do that. But I try to be very respectful of people. I always end every session with what worked for you today, what didn't work for you today, because if I'm using a tool that I think will work for you but you're really not listening, it doesn't help me to not know that didn't work for you. So I want you to be honest with me in return and let me know, yeah, that didn't work and this is why it didn't work.
In your day-to-day, do you have situations where you wanted to have somebody, you're encouraging them, give me a call, and these are the reasons why? Do you ever have those kind of things, or
like me asking the person to give me a call,
or what? Because I don't want to make that situation
right.
up, but something that, we should get together. The reason why I wanted to put a call to action that's from you is, if you're going through A, B, C, and you think about these things, hey.
I've had that happen where I've reached out, and that's totally not me. And I know that's not maybe. That's definitely the hand of God, because I'm not that pushy person. I'm more of even though some people might think I'm pushy, but I think people label certain things. They're not accustomed to what assertiveness is, so they'll mislabel certain things as aggressive that are not. But I'm usually like, hey, do you, so I will not. And part of that is cultural too, that we're not very pushing ourselves on people. That's considered, to the point that we don't come into a room and say, hi, my name is so and so. That's considered very rude. So for me to push and force, hey, call me, I think you got a problem, I tend to not do that. But sometimes I've noticed certain situations where it's like it's hit me, and I'm like, well, and I try to always put it and say, I'm here if you want, just so you know, this is what I do or whatever. And a couple of people I'll say, hi, I'm Dr. Linda. I just feel the need to introduce myself to you and to let you know that if ever you need somebody to talk to, please do. But it's on your own, if you'd like my number, I'm more than happy to give it to you. But like anything else, it's up to you. And some people take me up on it and some people don't. That's okay. Because again, it's back on that thing of God gave you free will. I'm not going to take it away from you. So I also understand that it can be scary to say I need help. It can be scary to tell a complete stranger your deepest, darkest secrets, even though there are laws that protect your privacy. I know it's a scary prospect, and sometimes just because somebody knows they need to change doesn't mean they're ready to change. So there's a lot of that involved too. But I'm hoping that either they'll call me or they'll call somebody else. I'm not so vainglorious that I think I'm the end-all be-all of therapy. So maybe just by me nudging them a little bit, they started to realize that, hey, somebody cares out there. Maybe I should reach out to somebody. And maybe they're reaching out to a friend even. It doesn't always even have to be therapy, because I've even offered some people, if you just want to talk story, if you just need an ear, I'm here. So it's not always therapy. It's always just recognizing where somebody is hurt and being an ear for people.